There are two main approaches to designing main battle tanks: the Western way and the Soviet way. A typical NATO tank is a relatively big vehicle operated by a four-man crew and armed with a 120mm gun with good elevation. Soviet engineers usually go for a low profile, a densely packed interior, and a 125mm gun with an autoloader. All in all, tanks belonging to different schools of tank design are so different, both visually and on a technical level, that in most cases you can easily tell whether a vehicle was made in the USSR or in the West just by looking at it. Sometimes, though, engineers decide to walk the middle path, making good use of ideas and design choices of both schools of tank design. That's basically what happened in the People's Republic of China, where Soviet tanks were eventually used as a base for original local designs. The USSR provided Communist China with tanks right from the earliest days of the Republic. For example, in Korea, tankers of the Socialist bloc used Soviet designs of the World War II era, the IS-2 and the T-34-85. Obviously, Chinese engineers were very much interested in using those tanks to develop their own combat vehicles, and there were even some efforts made, but ultimately a more economic solution was found. In 1956, the Soviet Union agreed to provide China with T-54A tanks, and all technical documentation needed to produce them in China. This initiative was ultimately a big success. No later than 1959, the PRC introduced their new tank with an industrial designation of WZ-120, which we know as the Type 59. It looked exactly like the Soviet T-54A, but there were a few important changes made under the hood. For instance, both its engine and gun, while heavily inspired by Soviet tech, were actually made in China. Furthermore, the early Type 59 tanks had to make do without an infrared searchlight or a main gun stabilizer. That was something that Chinese engineers had to take care of later on. Despite those minor shortcomings, Type 59s became an extremely important milestone for the Chinese tank industry, allowing China to introduce countless new tanks in the following decades. One of the first such vehicles rolling off the factory floor was the WZ-121, which we know as the Type 69. It deviates even further from the T-54A formula, which is even more noticeable with thorough examination. The vehicle was fitted with a new 580 horsepower engine, a domestically produced smoothbore cannon, night vision equipment, and a laser rangefinder. It wasn't just reliability and combat effectiveness that made the T-54A and the Type 59 the backbone of the Chinese armored forces. During the early 1960s, there was a huge shift in Sino-Soviet relations, with two countries suddenly on the brink of war, even with some local skirmishes on their respective borders. While fighting for the control of the tiny Damansky Island, Chinese forces managed to capture a T-62, which gave China precious insight into a chapter of tank building, something that they made very good use of, along with their own combat experience when designing a new generation of vehicles. Furthermore, China made notable strides in developing its relations with the West. For instance, the Export 2G variant of the Type 69 received a 105mm rifled gun, which was a Chinese version of the classic L7 cannon, manufactured in China under British license. Despite the fact that Chinese engineers experimented and innovated a lot while modifying the T-54A to build their own MBTs, the Soviet influence was still unmistakably there, even with the newer vehicles. Take a look at the ZTZ-59D1, a late variation of the Type 59. For example, it has all the telltale signs showing its heritage. The mushroom-like vent on the turret, the immediately recognizable design of the engine compartment, 5 road wheels on each side with a big gap between the first and second road wheel. If you know where to look, you will never mistake it for the T-55 or the T-62. Only with the introduction of their second-generation MBTs, Chinese engineers stopped building their tanks around the T-54 chassis. The Soviet influence was still there, of course, but new vehicles were designed and built in China from scratch. During the 1990s, China introduced new modern MBTs, the Type 96 tanks. Even though this time they didn't get their hands on a T-72 or corresponding technical documentation, Chinese engineers basically came to the same conclusions as their Soviet counterparts, creating their own take on the Soviet MBT formula in the process. There's an autoloader right in the middle of the crew compartment, fuel storage in the front, a 3-man crew, and a 125mm gun. The vehicle's transmission was designed in a way to allow the tank to reach the speed of 59 km per hour when advancing, and up to 7 kph in reverse. The later variation of this MBT, the Type 96A, was fitted with thermal sights and ERA effective at defeating both heat and kinetic projectiles. Apart from that, China was hard at work developing a true third-generation MBT, a vehicle that was accepted into service as the Type 99. Performance-wise, it is very similar to the T-72B3 and other modern Russian tanks. There are several well-known variations of the Type 99, and both the second and third model, with their improved turrets, are available in War Thunder. Tanks of this series are fitted with bleeding-edge equipment, laser rangefinders, thermal sights for both commander and gunner, and an independent panoramic sight for the tank's commander. Mobility-wise, these MBTs are similar to Russian MBTs of the T-72 family, but they're not as mobile as the T-80. Their 1,200 horsepower engines, based on German engines manufactured by MTU, are pretty powerful indeed, but a Type 99 weighs 51 tons, so there's that. Nowadays, China is putting a lot of effort into developing their armored forces. Old Type 59 tanks are being swiftly retired, with hundreds of Type 96 and Type 99 tanks coming in to replace them. By the way, both are available in War Thunder at high ranks, where they are more than capable of holding their ground against their foreign counterparts, thanks to good armor, lots of firepower, and excellent modern equipment. What do you think about the MBTs of the PRC? Did Chinese engineers succeed in getting out of the Soviet shadow? Tell us what you think in the comments below.